Now, Donald Trump is set to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu later, Trump's first meeting with a foreign leader since becoming president. The Israeli Prime Minister treading rather a tightrope as he faces competing pressure from his right-wing coalition to end the temporary truce against Hamas militants in Gaza and from war-weary Israelis who want the remaining hostages home and the 15-month conflict to end. Until now, Trump has remained rather guarded about the long-term prospects for the truce. Well, France 24's chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, is with me here on set. Rob, there's an awful lot, isn't there, riding on this summit? There
really is. I mean, the negotiations have been going pretty well so far. The ceasefire is held between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The hostages are being released, but they've reached a critical point, the start of the negotiations on phase 2, which if they go through, if they're successful, will lead to the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops, the release of all the remaining living hostages, and make the ceasefire permanent. There's an awful lot to play for here, and Donald Trump is very mindful of that as he looks, I imagine, although he's been quite careful about how much he says at this stage, looking at a wider picture. For his part, Benjamin Netanyahu goes clearly with an agenda of his own. It's not at all clear, for instance, that he's committed to taking the ceasefire through to the next stage. He also wants to talk about Iran. And too, he's interested in the wider Middle East. At the same time as that, there's been a reshuffle going on in the Israeli negotiating team to put somebody, Ron Dermer, the strategic affairs minister in Israel, somebody who's more aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu's point of view on where things should move in the Middle East, but also close to the Trump administration, born in Miami, as the chief negotiator. It looks, it has to be said, as though this Trump administration, with its new point man in the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is determined to put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to try and push him down the path of making this agreement with Hamas stick. But, you know, there's always that element of ambiguity with Donald Trump. You're not quite sure what he's playing at until it actually happens.
Yeah, Donald Trump, I mean, there's nothing predictable really about domestic affairs and certainly about foreign policy, I suppose, since he took control.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, we know that the bigger picture for Donald Trump is a regional deal which involves Saudi Arabia recognizing Israel. In other words, an extension of the Abraham Accords, which he negotiated in his first presidency. Is that going to happen? Well, you know, there's certainly a chance that it could. He's got plenty of credit with this Israeli government. He was the man who moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, who recognized United Jerusalem as capital of the state of Israel, who recognized the Golan Heights, occupied by Israel for over 40 years as an integral part of Israel, despite the fact that Syria still claims it as theirs. He is the man who, on coming into office this time round, decided to lift sanctions against settlers on the West Bank. So, you know, he can use that. And what he wants is a deal which will lead to peace in the Middle East, which he will be able to take the credit for, and will lead to enormous business opportunities for the United States and those around Donald Trump. You know, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, is very close to MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I'm sure they're looking very closely at the opportunities that they can gain from this sort of a deal. But, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu could still be the fly in the ointment.
Yeah, I mean, there are major stumbling blocks, aren't there, in the way of a deal, and there's not much goodwill, critics would say anyway, from Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
Yeah, this is one of the problems that Benjamin Netanyahu faces. If he's persuaded, if Donald Trump twists his arm behind his back and tries to push him in the direction of continuing the deal and putting a final stop to this war in Gaza, he knows that inside his own government, the religious right is firmly opposed to this deal and has made it clear that they will pull out of any deal that he tries to do with Donald Trump or anyone else that leads to Hamas remaining in control in the Gaza Strip, and Israel not achieving all the goals that it set out at the beginning of the war in 2023. Already, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the security minister, has pulled out of the government. Bezalel Smotrich, the finance affairs minister, also on the extreme right, has said that if Netanyahu goes ahead with the second phase of the deal, he will pull out as well. That could mean the collapse of the coalition government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, with all the political and judicial consequence that would mean for him, including possibly being back in court on corruption charges. That's something he clearly wants to avoid. He has been reassured by members of the opposition that they will protect him against the collapse of his government. In other words, they will cushion bed any sort of attempt by the far right to put him in that sort of difficulty. Donald Trump at the same time pressing as well. But that's only half of the difficulty for Netanyahu. The other half is what to do with Hamas. We've seen over the last few days of the hostage releases demonstrating absolutely clearly that they're still in control in Gaza. Can they be persuaded to leave the scene, if a deal is done? Israel quite clearly can never accept the continued presence of a Hamas leadership in Gaza. But if they can't move forward on that, then it looks like the coalition agreement, the agreement that's been negotiated over the last few weeks, could fall apart.